I'm calling out all the parents. If you're a parent and your child is in pre-K to elementary school to high school, I'm calling you out. The children today, I have never experienced, and I'm 22. Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life. I teach 5-year-olds ballet, 5-year-old girls ballet. I have a class of 10 students. They don't respect any authority. You ask them, can you stand in your designated spot? They're telling you no and shut up. They're throwing things at each other. They're throwing things at other people, other classmates. You say, can everybody sit in their spot? I don't want to, I'm not doing that. You don't get to tell me what to do. You're not my mom. You confront the parent. The parent tries to argue with you and fuss at you because you tried to reprimand and redirect their kid. I told a young little girl, please sit in your spot. You're not my mom, you don't tell me what to do. Okay. When her mom came to pick her up, I said, hey, your daughter's having a hard time following instructions, and 7 times today I've had to redirect her to just sit in her spot. Well, clearly she didn't want to sit, and mind you, this is a mom. Clearly she didn't want to fucking sit right there. So, I mean, if she's telling you she don't want to do something, why keep asking her to do it? You know she's not going to do it. What world do we live in?
So teachers are clearly tired of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So for the past several years, especially since COVID, we've seen an uptick of teachers leaving the force in droves, citing exhaustion, burnout, and a whole host of other stuff. There's also talks about how Gen Z and Gen Alpha just can't read today. So today I want to dive into why teachers are quitting and the issues with kids and parenting in the school system nowadays. So I want to make this very clear that I'm not an educator, so I don't claim to know all the ins and outs of the issues in the education system, and I understand that this is a very multifaceted and very layered topic, and so I don't want to claim like I know everything. But what I do know is from the research I've done, and I also have a lot of friends in the education system, so I get to hear their perspective almost daily because my friends are struggling. They love their job, but sometimes they really be going through it. So I really wanted to kind of speak to their perspective as well as just what I've seen online and kind of this uptick of this conversation. And I've personally gone on YouTube and watched so many why I quit teaching videos. I find them so fascinating because the teacher realm is so outside of my realm, because I work in tech and I do YouTube, and so I have no idea what's going on in the school system nowadays. And I love kids, so I love to know what's on the up and up, but it's still something I'm pretty ignorant on. So I just wanted to open up this conversation on my channel, and I'd love to hear your guys' perspective as well. But again, I don't claim to be an expert, so just wanted to make that clear. So why are teachers quitting? According to the National Education Association, teacher burnout is defined as a condition in which an educator has exhausted the personal and professional resources necessary to do the job. So many of these factors are also due to heavy workloads, behavioral issues, lack of parenting, staff shortages, social media issues, safety issues, low salaries, mental health, lack of funding, and so much more. K-12 teachers are actually the #1 most burnt out profession in the United States as of 2023, and there are 500,000 less teachers post-pandemic. So as you heard above, there are many issues that are plaguing the school system post-pandemic, and a lot of these were pre-pandemic as well, but I want to dive into the behavioral issues first. But before we go any further, I'd like to take time to thank today's sponsor, which is Parade. So I just got these new pieces from Parade, and I absolutely love the quality, feel, and look of all these pieces. Let me tell y'all, this cloud scoop bralette is one of the softest bras I've ever touched, held, or owned. This bralette really lives up to its name just because of how soft it is. I wore this bralette under my shirt to the gym. I went out with my family to DC over the weekend, and I felt like I had a soft little pillow on my chest. It felt like a plushie on my chest. And I also wanted to point out this sweat wicking workout brief. So now that it's getting colder, I tend to wear more when I go to the gym. I tend to wear more heavier clothes, and therefore when you're wearing heavier clothes to the gym, you tend to sweat more. So I feel like this workout brief has done a great job at just keeping the sweat away, and it's also seamless, and so I'm not feeling a bunch of fabric rubbing up against my skin. And so I just think it does a great job at doing that as well. And I also love these other bralettes that I got as well. Like, I love just the color and the vibrancy of these, and I really see myself even wearing these in the summer under my shirts. I just love the vibrancy of them. So if you want to check out these pieces, Parade's best sale of the year is finally happening for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And so Parade is giving everyone 30% off site-wide, but my code Boateng-BF gets you 50% off the entire site, which is the best sale of the year. So you can click the link, yourparade.com/Boateng-BF for 50% off site-wide. So thank you so much, Parade, to sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into talking about teachers and their struggles with Gen Alpha.
So I found a great quote by a comedian named Milton Berle, and I think he sums up the education system perfectly today. So he said, "This is how it is today. The teachers are afraid of the principals are afraid of the superintendents are afraid of the Board of Education, the board is afraid of the parents are afraid of the children, and the children are afraid of nothing." So I couldn't find when this quote was said, but this man died in 2002, and his quote could not ring true more today. Like, this quote I think rings very true. If you Google search, you just see tons and tons of news articles of schools all around the nation struggling with fighting, behavioral issues. I mean, Charlottesville High School apparently canceled classes for 3 days amid reports of fights in Charlottesville. I don't know exactly where Charlottesville is, but I found this article, okay? And teachers were refusing to come in as a result of the fights. They were literally basically striking and saying, "We're not going to work in these conditions. We don't feel safe in these conditions, and we don't want to break up your children every other day over some nonsense." You know what I mean? Like, we don't get paid enough to have to deal with your kids' fighting and dysregular hormones, you know? Duval County High Schools also recorded up to 510 fights within the last school year. So this is across the county. Like, Duval County recorded over 510 fights. It's also been noted by a lot of teachers online. I've seen in a lot of these videos where people are talking about why they quit. I've heard about it in my friends' stories. They say there is no follow through with administration when a child is disciplined. So students are allowed to act out and sometimes do the most heinous things, and then they're sent back to class the next hour like nothing ever happened. You know, they're fed candy and snacks. You know, the bad kids are getting punished. So I decided to ask one of my best friends kind of like her perspective on this, because she is a 4th grade teacher. And so I was like, okay, what do you think about all this? So here's what she said. So she said, last year during the first semester, there were 80 office referrals from the 3rd graders, now 4th graders. There are numerous kids in 4th grade now that have been known for reckless and disrespectful behavior. Some kids walk out of the classroom and wander the hallways whenever they like. There is no consequences. There are also kids that go to the bathroom and play and make messes every day, yet as far as I know, there have been no suspensions. A few of my students have been victims to threats and fights, yet all that happened was a phone call home and an apology, and it's usually the same kids over and over again. There's a big debate about whether or not students should be suspended, you know, the whole school to pipeline statistics. My frustration is that when kids make mistakes, school counselors are sympathetic to the perpetrators and often give them a free pass. And I know it's not just at my school. My friend who teaches middle school says it's the same sort of deal. She told me that one of her students can go to the counselor's office instead of going to class just to avoid the kid starting trouble in her classroom. In the counselor's office, the kid gets snacks and does nothing. And I've also heard this with my friend as well, like my other friend that's in another district. Same thing. You know, the perpetrators are the ones that are getting coddled and are getting, you know, the pass. And I think this is also something that, again, teachers are tired of seeing. They're like, yo, this is messed up. And for example, like, a lot of times kids are not allowed to defend themselves. I remember when I was in school, I was in 6th grade, and I never forgot this, but my, I guess, I don't know what you call her, but I guess my 6th grade principal, she was like, if you're in a fight and someone tries to punch you, don't do anything. And I was like, excuse me? She was like, even if you go like this to catch their hand, to catch their punch, you're gonna get in trouble for that. And I understand now that these educators, these people, they don't want to be held liable, but it's like you can't even defend yourself. So you got these poor kids that are suffering because of these repeat offenders in the classroom, and they're expected to just deal with it every day. So I can imagine as a teacher, you're looking at that, and it's totally against moral code and moral justice and ethics and all of that in your mind, but you have to deal with that. So that's something that is really frustrating. I also want to go into how the pandemic affected student behavior, academics, and overall mental health. So I found an article from July of this year that said that students aren't rebounding from the academic effects of the pandemic. So according to the assessment provider NWEA, students aren't gaining ground fast enough in reading and math to make up for the academic effects of the pandemic. So the report, which analyzed test scores from 6.7 million US public school students in grades 3 through 8, found that students are still making progress at a slower rate than their peers were pre-COVID. And on average, students will need the equivalent of 4.1 additional months of instruction in reading and 4.5 months in math to meet pre-pandemic levels of achievement, the report estimates. So I found this incredibly interesting and honestly very sad that things have fallen this far, but then it doesn't surprise me either because during the pandemic, I was in my last semester of college. The amount of busy work I had to do during the pandemic was insane. I literally remember my communications class before the pandemic was pretty chill. I used to show up like late every other class because it was my last semester. I was ready to graduate. I had a job lined up at the time, so I literally didn't care anymore about my education. I was like, give me my diploma and get me out of here. I was just, chilling. I was coasting. And then the pandemic hit. And then I had to do twice the amount of papers, twice the amount of quizzes. Like, I had to attend every single lecture online, and it was just a lot. It was a lot of busy work, and therefore I wasn't really expanding my knowledge at that point. I was just trying to get the work done. And mind you, even though I was pretty lazy about this class, I actually did enjoy it. It was communications, and I like to talk. So I enjoyed learning about the intricacies of human communication. But once the pandemic hit, I was just so inundated with work, I was tired. And I remember thinking of how frustrating it must be to be in elementary, middle, or high school during the pandemic. Because for me as a college student, it was annoying, and that was only for half a semester because literally 2 months later I graduated. So I was like, that was irritating to deal with for half a semester. So I couldn't have imagined being in grade school and how difficult that had to be, because I think in grade school, it's a very different environment. You're around your peers all the time. You rely on each other. You rely on the teacher to get you through school. It's that kind of environment that really fosters collaborativeness and, sharing ideas amongst your peers. It's not as independent as colleges. College is more independent. You kind of do your own thing. You find your own rhythm. But in grade school, you're dependent on one another. And so I was thinking, oh my goodness, that was crazy. I couldn't have imagined having to do trig or college algebra in a pandemic. And mind you, I was terrible at math. English was my thing. Math I was terrible at, and I still am, so I couldn't have imagined having to do that alone. I also wanted to discuss social media's effects on learning. So again, I feel like this part of the issue is very multi-layered, and you could look at it from many perspectives. I feel like for the younger generation, they're incredibly dependent. So Gen Alpha and incredibly, they're very dependent on, technology, because a lot of them started using it once they came out the womb. Within a year or two, they knew how to navigate iPads. I mean, I remember when I was a developmental therapist, I worked with students that clients that knew how to navigate iPads, and they were like 2 years old, 2 to 6 years old. We see how parents give their kids devices to keep them occupied all the time. So therefore, these kids are basically being raised on these devices, and they're not really being monitored because a lot of parents don't have time or the energy to monitor what their kids are watching. So these kids are becoming increasingly dependent on technology.
I need everybody else in my generation to promise that we are not going to raise iPad children. Please. I just saw a TikTok from some millennial, and she was like, here's a message to Gen Z. You might make fun of us, but watch out. We're raising the next generation, and they're going to eat you up. Your kids can't read, okay? You're raising Gen Alpha. They're bizarre and terribly behaved. Y'all bred iPad children. You have been shoving media and screens in these kids' faces since birth. They probably have no imagination because their brain hasn't actually been forced to come up with any original thought. Gen Z, please, when we are older, don't give your kids iPads at the dinner table.
And I also think that because of this, it results in parents not interacting with their kids as much as they should. Because, okay, I'm going to give them the iPad to occupy them while I cook this or while I do this. And I get that there's a lot of things to do as a parent, but I think it results in more passive parenting rather than really being interactive with your child and being engrossed in what they're doing. My friend who was an instructional assistant and would assist teachers and would run her own reading group, noticed this a lot, where a lot of the parents didn't seem as involved in what the child was doing in their studies. It was kind of like send you to school and let the teachers deal with it, rather than really getting engrossed in the work themselves or getting engrossed in what their child is learning. We then have to factor in the rise of AI, such as ChatGPT, and all these other tools that students can use to basically do their work easily, type up a whole essay on MLK and there you go. And I think it really dulls down critical thinking. I was just having this conversation with my dad at the dinner table a few hours ago, and he was saying, this has to stop. This has to stop. When I was in school, when I was getting my master's, we had the big dinosaur type computers, and that was the very first computer I used, Windows 95, like Windows 9 or XP was one of the two. And so we were talking about how even back then people weren't even that reliant on computers. Once the mid 2000s came, that's when computers became more of a thing. But when my dad was in school, in master's program, it wasn't really like that. So again, social media can be used for good. Social media is good in so many ways, but I think it's become more of a detriment because, again, it's absolved critical thinking skills. It's absolved the ability to actually discern and dissect what you're reading. I'm thinking of media literacy. I remember a couple of years ago, I was obsessed with media literacy because I woke up to the fact that people really do read headlines and they don't like to look in deeper, and they like to take things at face value. And you really can't when it comes to the media, anything you read or see online. And going back to behavioral issues, I think a lot of times teachers struggle to really maintain boundaries as far as technology, because if you want to try to take away a child's phone, it just leads into bigger problems. So the teachers end up having to take the fall. And it's even crazier because even adults struggle to put their phones down. Even adults that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s struggle to put their phones down. I know I struggle to put my phone down. My screen time is ridiculous. And so I can't imagine, for a child, especially with the way social media is now. When I was in school, obviously iPhone was very much a thing. I think by the time I graduated, the iPhone 6 was out. Yeah, I think that's when I graduated, the iPhone 6. And it was hard for us to put our phones down back then, but now social media has advanced so much, technology has advanced so much. And it was so interesting because I found this Reddit post where someone commented, look, phones are amazing tools, but their openness and addictiveness of games and social media negate any possible positive uses. No matter how interesting and engaging my lessons, no matter how culturally relevant and thought-provoking my activity, I can't compete with the vastness of TikTok, the specificity of interest cultivation of Instagram, and the billions of dollars that big tech pours into their apps to get eyeballs on screens. In the past, teachers did not have to compete with any of this. What I can offer is ultimately still work, and that's just not what most of us would rather do with our time. So I thought this was a very profound message, and I think it again goes to show that a lot of times teachers feel like they can't really compete. And so I just think in general, this is a very interesting topic, and I, kind of kept it a little small because I didn't want this video to run on, but I definitely think the pandemic definitely threw a wrench in a lot of things, and I really think that teachers are struggling to really connect with students and really to bring them the best experiences in school that they can. And I think children are still struggling a lot, middle school, high school, elementary school, the mental effects of the pandemic, the ability to critically think. It's a huge layered situation. And I think this is why teachers are just tired of teaching Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're tired of the school system. They're tired of, not being advocated for. The children aren't being advocated for. And so it just creates this messy hamster wheel that we keep going on. So I just wanted to open up the conversation on my channel. I just think this is very interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments kind of what your perspective is on the whole education system and how the pandemic has affected its social media. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.